All right, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 18. We're going to finish the chapter today because there's really only a couple of main thoughts in the rest of these verses, and so we're going to look at those in the time that we have. I'm going to read down through verse number 21, look at our first thought, and then we'll take the next section, then the next section, and so on and so forth. So Hebrews chapter 12, verse number 18. For you're not coming to the mount that might be touched, and that burned with fire, nor unto blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet, and the voice of words, which voice they that heard entreated that the word should not be spoken to them any more, for they could not endure that which was commanded, and if so much as a beast touched the mountain, it should be stoned, or thrust through with a dart. And so terrible was the sight that Moses said, I exceedingly fear and quake. This is taking us back to the Mount Sinai where Moses received the law. And there was a command given, and as a matter of fact, if you hold your place here, go back to Exodus 19 and we'll take a look at it. The command was given not to touch the mountain, not to come to the mountain, and even if an animal came up to it, they were going to kill it. If a person's hand touched it, they were going to be stoned, so on and so forth. But that's given to us in Exodus chapter 19, starting in verse number 12. And so what we're talking about in Hebrews 12 in these first couple of verses goes back to this time, Exodus chapter 19 and verse 12. And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves, that you go not up into the mount, or touch the border of it. Whosoever touches the mount shall surely be put to death. There shall not a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned, or shot through, whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet sounded long, they shall come up to the mount. And Moses went down from the mount unto the people, and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said unto the people, Be ready against the third day, come not at your wives. And it came to pass on the third day in the evening that there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. And Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the nether part of the mount. And Mount Sinai was altogether on smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace. And the whole mount quaked greatly. When the voice of the trumpet sounded long, and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. And the Lord came down upon the mount Sinai on the top of the mount, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mount. And Moses went up, and the Lord said unto Moses, Go down, charge the people, lest they break through unto the Lord to gaze, and many of them perish. Let the priests also which come near to the Lord sanctify themselves, lest the Lord break forth upon them. And Moses said unto the Lord, The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for thou chargest us, saying, Set bounds about the mount, and sanctify it. And the Lord said unto him, Away, get thee down, and thou shalt come up, thou and Aaron with thee. But let not the priest and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break forth upon them. So Moses went down unto the people, and spake unto them. And if you pick up in the next chapter, it says, And the Lord said these words, and he gives the 10 Commandments. And so what we're looking at back in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 18 through 21, takes us back to this time. Now, what happened in Exodus chapter 20? The 10 Commandments. That's the beginning of the law. And so the giving of the law was given at Mount Sinai, and there was distance between the Lord and the people. All right, that's the main point in these first couple of verses, is there was a distance. You couldn't come to the border of the mount. You couldn't touch the mount. If you touched it, if you came towards it, if you crossed the line, you were going to die. The Lord was on that mount. And so there was a distance. But now we come to verse number 22 back in Hebrews 12. It says, "But ye are come unto Mount Zion." That's different than Mount Sinai. "But ye are come unto Mount Zion, and unto the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn, which are written in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect, and Jesus the mediator, and the new covenant, and to the blood of the sprinkling that speaketh better things than that of Abel. See that you refuse not him that speaketh." And I'm going to talk about this in just a moment. "For if they escape not who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven." And so now we got this closeness. When we're talking about Mount Sinai and the giving of the law, there's distance. But now we're invited up to Mount Zion. We're invited to the city. We're invited to where the Lord is. And then look at what it says there. "Unto the city of the living God and the heavenly Jerusalem, and to an innumerable company of angels." Now, I've mentioned this several times. You guys remember when we were talking about the 10,000 talents? And then in Revelation chapter 5, there was the 10,000 angels times 10,000 angels. The Greek word is the same for the 10,000 talents, for the 10,000 angels, and this word innumerable. The Greek word is the same Greek word where we get our English word myriad. So it's an unknowable number. And so when you see innumerable here, actually it's the two words, innumerable company. Both of those are that same Greek word where we get our English word myriad, or again, an unknowable number. And so we see a closeness here where we're able to go, and we're the ones that are able to listen to him speak. And you remember, you see in verse 25, we read verse 25, "See that you refuse him, not him that speaketh. For if they escape not who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from the heaven." So that first one that spoke was God on Mount Sinai. The second one where it says, "Much more shall we not escape, shall not we escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven," that's Jesus Christ. Now, was it bad to ignore the law? Let's talk about Mount Sinai. The law for the day was, don't touch the mount. Was it bad? Was that bad? I mean, your hand touched, let's say you just slipped and fell and your hand touched the mount. Dead meat. That's kind of rough, isn't it? That's kind of rough, isn't it? That's a hard law. How about keeping the 10 Commandments? Can we name the 10 Commandments? "Thou shalt have no other God before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee graven images. Thou shalt not bow down to them nor serve them." All right, keep the Sabbath is one. "Thou shalt not kill," so we're down to like 6. "Honor your father or mother." We said that. Hold on, all of you are talking. What'd you say? Steal, adultery, covet. That finished it out.
And no pineapple on pizza.
You're dead meat. All right, so how many of you can do that? How many of you had no other gods before God? We can't even get past the first one. All right, how many of you have ever had a graven image of anything in heaven, on earth, or below the earth? All right, now we can get a little nitpicky, can't we? Any of you have those little figurines of animals in your house? That's a graven image. If we wanted to get nitpicky. Any of you ever told a falsehood? Have any of you ever gone into a convenience store as a child and stole the bubble gum? Any of you, don't confess your sin, just say yes. How about a pen from work?
It was an accident.
Are we talking about prior to being saved or after?
Ever.
So none of us can do that. Follow the Ten Commandments. None of us.
I'm getting to the point.
I'm sorry I rushed you.
Thank you. Do you want to go home? Don't be rushing the preacher when he's trying to make a point. But that's exactly my point, is it's hard to keep the Ten Commandments. It's hard. But how easy is it to accept a gift? And that's what salvation is. You didn't do anything for it. You didn't do anything to earn it. You received a gift that was paid for by Jesus Christ. See, we're talking about a difference here. Verse 25, see that you refuse not him that speaketh, that was on the earth. For if they escape not who refused him that spake on earth. They did not escape if they refused him. So they said, no, you know what? Mount Sinai is free. I'm a free man. I'm going to go and walk wherever I want to walk. And they stepped right on Mount Sinai. What do you think happened? Yeah. You ain't walking no more. But the second part there, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven. So if we refuse Jesus Christ, what kind of death is that? That's eternal. That's an eternal separation. So you see this much more. And I told you in the beginning when we started the book of Hebrews that the main statement that we're going to read through this is going to be much more. Jesus is much more than the law. Refusing to listen to Jesus is a much more punishment, a much harsher punishment than refusing to listen to God who gave the command, don't touch Mount Sinai. You were just going to die physically. If you refuse to listen to Jesus Christ, you're going to die spiritually. Verse 26, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he hath promised, saying, yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. And so when we read back in Exodus, were there thunderings and lightnings? Have you ever been in a really bad thunderstorm? When the lightning struck and the thunder roared, did you feel like things were shaking? Now, have you ever been in an earthquake? I used to live in California. It is not cool when what you think is solid ground is doing this. That is not cool. You're like, you've heard that, the statement that rocked your world? Oh, man.
And it was only a little one.
The one we were in, I want to say it was a high 6 or a low 7. It was shaking. It was moving. It was shaking and moving. It was, and you're standing there and you're doing this. That is not cool. That is not cool, because you think of all things, the ground ought to be, steady. But look who's shaking the earth here. Or what's shaking the earth? It's his voice. It's his voice that causes the earth to shake. Are you guys familiar with the Great White Throne Judgment? Are you familiar with that? Do we need to turn it? Okay, we got somebody who's not familiar with that. Revelation chapter 20. And verse number 11. Revelation chapter 20 and verse number 11. Now, while I'm reading this, I want you to think about what it says in Hebrews that we just read. It says, whose voice then shook the earth, but now he that promised, saying, yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. Revelation chapter 20 and verse 11, I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. Have you ever just meditated on that phrase right there? Whose face they fled away. When they looked at him that was on the great white throne judgment, they wanted to run away, and there was no place for them. By the way, the one sitting on the great white throne is Jesus Christ. He is the judge. He judges Christians, and he's the one that's going to judge the unsaved. And I saw, verse 12, the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. My contention, and I'm standing over here right now, the books are the 66 that you're holding in your hand. Every book or letter that's in the Bible, the 66 books of the Bible, has a reference to redemption, has a reference to Jesus Christ. We call that the scarlet thread of redemption throughout the Scriptures. Genesis has a bunch of them, but it starts out in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15. Every book has a scarlet thread of redemption that goes through it. And so my contention is the books that are opened here are the 66 books, and we're judged out of those books. Did you do what God said? God said that he sent his only begotten Son, and he that hath the Son hath life, he that hath not the Son of God hath not life. That's what's in the books. We're judged out of those books. And then it says in verse 13, that the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them. And they were judged every man according to their works, and death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Do you think that that's going to be earth-shattering? How about heaven-shattering? And then if we were, speaking of that, and I think Randy posted something about this earlier today, if we go back into Peter, where it talks about the destruction of creation, it's going to be destroyed by fire this time. Don't you think there's going to be a little moving and shaking in heaven? By God's voice. By God's voice. And so we're seeing just different bits and pieces throughout the Scriptures of what's to come in these verses. Now go back to Hebrews chapter 12 and then verse number 28, and we'll look at the last two verses here. Wherefore we, receiving a kingdom that cannot be moved. John? If the kingdom cannot be moved, should I move? Wherefore, we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. Because he can kill us if we touch the mount, because he can destroy our soul if we don't accept him, because he's going to be the one at the great white throne, and he can shake all of creation with his voice. Because of all of those reasons, let us have grace. I think the idea there is let's get grace, whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. You know, if we had a better idea of who God was and what God does, don't you think we would serve him a little bit better? With a little more reverence, a little more fear. Well, we say, well, that word there doesn't really mean fear. You know what that word really means? There's a verse that says, knowing therefore the terror of the Lord. That's not a reverential respect. Okay. Fear. Have you guys ever heard this? Wait till your dad gets home. Have you ever heard that? Wait till your dad gets home. What? Now, did you have a reverential respect? It was part of it, but what else was there? Fear. I did not want to get beat by my dad. No, Mom, please, you beat me. Oh, no. My mom was, wait till your dad gets home. And my dad was a steel worker. He wrestled steel all day. Moved it around, laid it out, welded it. The man had forearms like steel beams until he died in his 80s. He could drive a nail with his forearm. I didn't want to get beat by my dad. And so when it says here, by the way, that word reverence, that's that reverential respect. You know what godly fear is? Dad's coming home. And let me just reiterate, or let me just back that up. Did you read the next verse yet? For our God is a consuming fire. Isn't that what verse 29 says? Why is it that we ought to serve him acceptably with reverence and godly fear? Daddy's about to come home. Why? For our God is a consuming fire. Boy, if we would keep that in our minds, wouldn't we change our attitudes on a lot of things? Well, God is a God of love. Yes. But I just read here in the same scriptures, our God is a consuming fire. Does that sound, the word consuming there, what do you, when you think of consuming fire, what do you think of? Burns it all. It's called ash. I once was a man and now I'm just a pile of ash. Why? My God is a consuming fire. We ought to serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear, for our God is a consuming fire. I got Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, and I'll be done. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world. Boy, we ought to park there for a little while. Be not conformed to this world. Let's make the church more like the world so we can win the world. Can I teach you that Hebrew word again? Hui. That's God forbid in Hebrew. Hui. Well, I'm gonna get piercings, and I'm gonna get tattoos, and I'm gonna get a golden chain, and I'm gonna let my hair grow longer, and I'm gonna stop wearing a tie, and I'm gonna put on some blue jeans, and oh look, I got some new chairs. We'll just have a little fireside chat. By the way, I'm speaking about me. So I can reach more of them. Why would they come to me? Aren't they looking for something different than what they are? Come out from among them. So be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Why? For my God is a consuming fire. Why should we serve Him acceptably? Why should we have reverence? Why should we have godly fear? My God is a consuming fire. Like I said, I think if we get a little more understanding, get a little bit, study maybe a little bit more these words: reverence, godly fear, consuming fire. It might change us just a little bit, don't you think? I don't want to meet that God. You know the God that I want to meet? God is mercy, God is love, God is peace, God is grace. That's the God I want to meet. I don't want to meet the one from whose face they're fleeing from. I don't want to meet that one. And so these last verses again are kind of separated into two. It's the Old Testament and the New Testament, and the New Testament is much more. You thought it was bad back then. It's going to be bad if you reject Jesus Christ. And by the way, these last two verses, that's for you and for me. We have grace. We're a part of that kingdom. We're the ones that serve God. How should we serve Him? Reverence, godly fear. Why? He's a consuming fire. All right, questions, comments?